In this event, we'll be exploring how to make a working business around an API. We're going to define exactly what we mean by API as a product, and we'll be considering what sort of models API products can embrace to create a modern, profitable, developer-friendly business. And before we get to our speakers, I thought I'd introduce what API as a product is and consider why so many new companies are adopting such a model. So for one, web-based APIs have become sort of a standard method to share data and integrate businesses. This has been going on for the last decade or so and has really peaked in recent years. Due to this, APIs are becoming commoditized as a way to deliver specialized functionality. This helps software teams avoid reinventing the wheel for common things like payments, geolocation, artificial intelligence, weather data, messaging, and more. And in this process, we've noticed that APIs have become more than just mere offshoots of an existing platform. Instead, a lot of them have become products in their own right. So we've seen API-based startups get a lot of attention and VC funding lately, especially after seeing success stories like Nihilus, Skyflow, Twilio, Shopify, and many others. So a lot of folks are wondering if there might be more API-based unicorns hidden out there, which might be the case. So what are some benefits of an API-based delivery? Well, due to their nature, I think APIs have a lot going on for them. For one, they fit the startup agenda pretty well. Arguably, APIs appeal to the concepts of specialization and disruption. Two, they're pretty platform agnostic. By using HTTP as a delivery mechanism, any developer could integrate APIs into their application, regardless of what platform or language they're using. Third, they can be self-service. So if you set them up correctly with great documentation and testing environments, APIs could enable passive income for the provider. And they're standardized. Developers are pretty familiar with APIs at this point, and API products typically adopt a REST style and serve JSON over HTTP. And lately, we've seen Open API specification, formerly Swagger, making major crossroads to document these services. So having a standardized machine-based delivery mechanism enables the rise of automation and overall digitalization, in my point of view. But creating a working self-service API model is harder than it seems, as we'll find out today. So there's really a lot to consider when building one out. You have to balance openness with charging for access. Providers must find their secret sauce of freemium, rate limiting, charging per call, or subscription pricing. And it helps to really know your developer users pretty well and monitor platform use and optimize this model to find the correct business. I'm excited about API as a product because it sort of feels like where the future is heading with this sort of commoditized software functionality. So I'm going to turn things over to our experts soon for gathering more perspective on API as a product. And today we're featuring Alan Glickenhouse, who will give us a more in-depth look at the API as a product trend. And then we'll turn things over to Ed Freyfogle for more on-the-ground insights learned from running an API-centric business. I just want to remind all of our real-time listeners that they can ask questions, and we'll be answering open questions in the Q&A right after these two sessions. So, like I said, first up, I'm honored to introduce Alan. Alan Glickenhouse is an API business strategist at IBM. Alan assists clients with their business and IT strategy for digital transformation and the API economy. Starting with an understanding of the client's business direction, IT strategy, and existing environment, Alan helps businesses successfully adopt a digital transformation and API strategy that fits their environment. And Alan is a Nordic APIs veteran. He's spoken at 2 of our platform summits and 1 Austin API summit, I believe. He's one of only a handful of monetization and business experts in the API realm, so I think it's super valuable to have him around. So great to have you back speaking, Alan, albeit 100% digital now. Sure. So take it away whenever you're ready. Okay. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Yeah. All right. So thanks, Bill. Yeah, I wish we were back in person again. I'm looking forward to those days. I've had my vaccines, so I'm ready to go. Whenever,
As am I.
whenever
Looking
these things
forward.
start up again, I'll be there. But there we go. Let me get myself so I can see things. Okay, move that out of the way. So yeah, I'm going to talk about API products: who, what, where, when, why, and how. Bill did my intro already, so that'll save me a minute or so. So this is me. In addition to the things Bill mentioned, I also do a lot of writing, and the list of topics that I write about are at the bottom of this page. And really, this content is taken from a couple of the blogs or papers that I've written on these topics: monetization and products and things like that. So you can find more writings, and I'll have links to everything I've written at the end of this deck, and I'll make this available to Bill so he can share it with everybody. All right, so the agenda is who, what, where, when, why, and how for API products, except we're going to do it in a different order: what, who, when, how, where, and why. And you know, I expect that the audience for this event is fairly knowledgeable about APIs. So my expectation is I'm going to really go fast through the beginning parts of this: the what, who, when, how, and where, and probably spend most of my time on the why. And that's where we'll get into some of the monetization topics and things like that, business models. But I did want to be complete, and I know that many of you, when you're having a discussion in your business about monetization or products, whichever way you're coming at it, there are a lot of people who don't understand the value or what has to be done or who does it and all these things. So with these charts, hopefully you can move forward and have a conversation with the rest of your business on what needs to get done. All right, so let's start with some really basics. The first part is what. And so an API product is an offering that you're going to make available to a target market to satisfy the customer's needs. And so I've underlined customer needs there. So as I think Bill introduced, it's, you know, knowing your developer and what they're looking for from you. Now, an API product could have one API in it. You might take one API, and we'll talk about what makes it a product after that. Or the possibility you might have multiple APIs that you put into a product together. The idea of the product is that we make it easier to consume for the developer, right? So rather than make them sign up for or figure out which exact APIs do they need, we put them together in this bundle and then wrap it so that it's easier for them to sign up and get everything they need from you all at once. Typically, part of that acquisition deals with plans, which are terms and conditions that we put around the products for their use. It could be usage limits or rate limits, and it could be pricing options, which, you know, we'll talk quite a bit about more later. They also tend to have security around the product. Even, you know, depending on who you're making the product available to, you may want to only have a selected audience, maybe your partners for your company, or maybe your internal employees could even benefit from an API product, or maybe you're making it available to the outside world. And then within the product itself, how many times, usage limits, and so on, are they allowed to access it? So that's what a product is. The who is an API product manager, and I've done whole sessions just on this one topic. But this is a role that, unfortunately, too many businesses try to do without, and you know, have the API developer role try to do this. And it's really a different skill set and a different task that this person needs to do. There's some upfront work that they do and some after work. And so before the product is done, this person needs to understand the target market. Who are they going after for to get as a consumer for this API product, and what exactly do they need? And so it's an understanding of that target audience and their needs, not necessarily what you have, and how you wrapper this together and how they're planning to use it. So once you've defined that, then you'll work with the API developer role to build out the necessary APIs and then create the product offering. We'll get into that a little bit more in the next page or two. Once the product is actually built, the product manager role has to drive the consumption of the API product. And too many times, again, I see that people will make the API product available and then they wonder why nobody's using it. And the answer is you have to drive the usage of these API products. you can't just make it available and assume everybody's going to find it or know, that it's better than what they used to do before. And, this comes down to changing culture, changing human behavior in many cases. People will do what worked for them in the past, and changing human behavior is tough. So you need to get out there and show these audiences that you're trying to get that they need to, if they use the API product that you have, their life will be better in some way. And so how does this make their life easier or better? And then measuring the results of that and iterating on changes to the product. So that's the product manager role, which is the answer to who. When and how, I mean, Bill introduced me, I come from IBM. We sell API management products, right, as well as many, many other things. And so our product and some of our competitors' products deal with managing an API lifecycle, which has several steps in it, from building the APIs and so on. And part of the lifecycle is to create products. And so we build the individual APIs, we wrapper them with plans, and we then build together the products that we want to make available. So there's a lifecycle management aspect to this that different roles will use, the developer in some cases, and the product manager and others, to make the API product item that we want to come to market with. The where do we publish this API? Where do people find the API product? And the answer is an API portal. So when potential consumers want to find these products, they come to your portal, hopefully, and that's where they're allowed to explore the offerings and sign up to use them, hopefully self-service. And the point of, again, the product is to make their life easier so that they can do self-service consumption of these APIs. And so you provide them code samples, you provide them the ability to try the APIs ahead of time, everything they need to use them, to sign up, and just make it so simple for them that there's no barriers to them adopting your API product. All right, so now I zipped through the beginning part. I'm going to kind of slow down a little bit here and talk about why, right? So the why for our product is, if you build it, they will come, just does not work, right? So this is what I was referring to before, that product manager needs to get out there and make this happen. And so we're building these API products because we want somebody to use them. And so don't assume that you only have to make them available. And the API products are about driving the consumption of our APIs, and we're fighting against whatever competitors we may have or inertia for the attention of an audience. And so without API products, we'd just be supplying a set of parts and hoping that people would find them and figure out what ones they need to solve their problem. And so you're putting the burden on the consumer to do that work. And the less burden you put on the consumer, the more likely they are to use what you've got coming to market. So that's why we do an API product. That's to kind of simplify the consumption of the APIs. But why do we want them to use our APIs? So let's just quickly talk about that. And so APIs allow business assets to be securely and easily used, consumed and used by developers. And these assets are the value that our business provides, and we want to gain some things from that. And so some of the topics that I've spoken about for the last decade or so are the business drivers that I've seen companies focus on for why they build APIs. And the four of them that I talk about are speed, reach, innovation, and share is a better name for the one I call domains. So we're sharing things across domains. But let me speak about each of these very quickly. So speed is speed to market. And this tends to be the first thing that most businesses focus on with APIs. They create APIs for their internal developers to develop offerings that their business wants to bring to market. And the goal is to deliver new offerings to market faster so that it's less time for them to do a new offering, and they generate revenue faster by having the market offering in place sooner. The second one is reach, reaching new customers, reaching new markets. We want to get more customers. And again, the result of that is revenue. This is often, nowadays, we talk about ecosystems and partners, and I'm doing a lot of conversations in that area about how do you reach out through an ecosystem to get more customers. And again, the result here is to drive more revenue. The third one is innovation. And businesses, again, have had a big focus on innovation for a long time, but more recently, it's about innovation at high speed and low risk or low cost. And so we want to create new offerings fast that maybe change the market or do something different than what we've done before. And if we're successful with that, we drive new revenue. However, we also want, if we're not successful and we want to not limit innovation, we expect that some innovative attempts will not work. We want to fail fast and inexpensively and at low risk, and therefore save money. So it's revenue and save money. And then the fourth one is more of an internal business perspective of sharing assets between lines of business or geographies, or just sharing things across the company better and making it easier to be productive and not duplicate efforts within a company. And so we're avoiding duplication, which is typically about saving money. And so these things are the primary things that businesses are doing with APIs. And this is the real API monetization. And I'm going to get into a lot of detail on the next couple of slides on what most people think of as monetization. But I didn't want to just talk about that, because 90% plus of the revenue that businesses are making or saving is in these areas. And these are not typically direct charging for APIs. So you will make a lot more money if you have a broader perspective on what API monetization is than if you're only focusing on how much can I charge for my individual API calls. That's not to say that's not a valid model. And so I have written a white paper on API business models, and we group them. I'll show you the details in the next slide, I think. But the 4 different groups, and the one that everybody wants to talk about is column number 2 here, where the developer is going to pay you for the use of your API. And like I said, that's a perfectly valid model. It's just not the only model. And so, as you're thinking about how do you make money through the use of APIs, there are times where you may want to pay somebody to use your APIs because they're sending customers to you and you're getting more revenue from them. They're acting as an agent for you. Most of what I spoke about on the previous slide, it falls into this indirect model where you're doing things to get your business offerings out there quicker or to more people and driving revenue through your business offerings, not directly charging for APIs. And the example I love is the Facebook example, where we all see the Facebook login option on many apps and websites that we go to. And Facebook makes that API available, and it's free. So anybody can log in with Facebook. And they're making a fortune off of that API because they're not charging for it. But when you use it to log in, they know what sites you're logging into, and they can then charge advertisers based on your interest in particular types of sites. So they're making money not directly through the API, but incredibly lots of money by making this free API available and charging advertisers. So this and much more is covered in the white paper, which you can get to from the link at the bottom of this screen. The paper then gets into a lot more detail, right? So we go into each one of these sub categories for most of the 4 major categories, and I'll explain what each one is, and then give you an example of a company that was doing it. Now, I wrote the paper, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 years ago now. So hopefully all the examples still exist, but you'll probably find other ones out there now. So this is something that's available to you. Last slide I wanted to cover is some key questions to think about when you're thinking about monetization. So again, I've done a whole topic just on monetization where we talk about the value chain and the value, who is the value, is the asset valuable or is it just a cost of doing business? And who is it valuable to? And so you think about the 3 parties involved here. There's you as the API provider. There's an API consumer who's going to use your API to do something with it, like maybe create their own mobile app or something like that. And then there's the end user of the mobile app. And you need to create what I call a win-win-win situation where everybody is benefiting from that flow of that API from you to the consumer to the end user. Some of the thinking in charging for APIs or not charging for APIs comes to owning or wanting to own the relationship with that end user. And so if you're charging the consumer for the API, then the consumer has the right to control the relationship with the end user. However, if you're paying the consumer to use your API, then you may be paying them to pass the end user to you to have an ongoing relationship and potentially generate more revenue. Thinking about pricing, again, if there's competitors out there that are not pricing, or it may be something that makes a consumer potentially reluctant to use your API, may decrease your access to customers. So, I'm not being negative on charging for APIs, but everybody wants that immediate gratification of charging for APIs, and you might get more money if you get them as a consumer for your offerings rather than individually charging for APIs. And so I talked about, should you pay them? And then a very common thing when you do go down the route of paying is to have some kind of a tiered structure that makes sense based on usage, which might be a low utilization to test it, or for free for getting started, and then maybe some pricing as you get higher and higher, right? So that's pretty much all I wanted to cover. Just summarizing here: what is API product, who is the product manager, where is the portal, when is and how are the life cycle and API management capabilities, and the why is always money, right? And so I know we'll open it up to questions afterward. And the rest of the content that's in this deck, which we'll hopefully get to you, is the writings that I've done. And page 2 on the left column here is where you're going to find the things on modernization that I've written about. So that's it. I will stop sharing, Bill, and pass it back to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Alan. A lot of great insights there. And we're already getting some good questions in from attendees. So yeah, looking forward to going through that after Ed's talk here. So I'm going to briefly introduce Ed Freyfogle. Ed is the co-founder of OpenCage, providers of a highly available enterprise-level geocoding API based on open data. Ed co-hosts the GeoMob podcast, a weekly discussion about innovation in location-based services. And today in his talk, Ed will give a broad overview of lessons learned across 5+ years of running an API-first SaaS business. Key points and examples will include serving a global customer base with a small team, difficulties of a freemium model, pros and cons of usage-based pricing models, and other insights. So as Alan has kind of, gone over these high-level details about what you really need to consider being an API product manager and kind of thinking about all these different API business aspects, hopefully we'll get some on-the-ground knowledge of what it really takes to implement this. So yeah, I'm going to stop my screen there right now, and yeah, feel free to take it away, Ed.
All right, thanks. Thanks very much. 1 second here we go. So, all right, we all good? Everyone can see? Yeah,
looks good.
Okay. So first off, thanks very much for having me here. It's a delight to be able to present to everyone. As someone who's benefited quite a lot from the Nordic API content and community over the years, it's good to be able to share some of the insights that we've had. So as you mentioned, I am one of the co-founders of a company called OpenCage. You can check out our site. There's the URL. We have one API, and that's it, and it's a geocoding API. So some of you may be asking, what is geocoding? So very briefly, I'm not going to go into a lot of details about our API, but just to give you a quick overview. Geocoding is the process where you have a place name or an address, and you turn that into a latitude or longitude or other geographic information. If you go from place name to longitude, latitude, that's forward geocoding. If you do the opposite, say, for example, you have the coordinates of a phone or a tracking device, that's reverse geocoding. So perfect use case for an API. And actually our API is fairly simple, particularly probably for this audience, because I know, at past events and things, there's a lot of discussion about kind of at the cutting edge of what's going on in the API world. And we take a different approach, very simplistic and basic. It's a REST API, return some JSON. Here's an example of a request. So, you can see there's you put in an API key and a query, and we send you back some information. So all very simple and straightforward, nothing particularly surprising, I would guess, for this audience. Here is an exact technical diagram of what we do. So you send your query to us, and then behind the scenes, we run a bunch of different geocoding software and aggregate that up and send it back to you. And so we build a lot on the OpenStreetMap community, which is a kind of global open data, open geodata community, but also others that are more country specific. The key point there is that we're basically using open data, and we're using a lot of open source software. And I'll get to some of the pros and cons of this in a moment. We've been, as you mentioned at the start, we've been doing this for now over 5 years, I think 6 or 7 years. And we have a lot of customers, big and small, all around the world. So big thanks to them for making it possible. Anyway, so let's get into why I've come to tell you all about this. As I said, as someone who's been in the API space for a couple of years now, I find that there's lots of very good technical advice. They're all like in the Nordic APIs community, but also all kinds of newsletters and things, and there's very good discussion about the newest technology and things like that. But there's not nearly as much about kind of the business side of things of running an API focused business. So my hope is that I can share some of our experiences and some of the challenges that we faced and help put a spotlight on some of those difficulties. I don't have magical answers to all the questions. We learn as we go. But nevertheless, I think having the discussion about some of these challenges is probably the first step towards helping discover what the answers might be. So the first thing is it's really hard, actually. And a lot of people probably naively start as I did or we did and think that it's more of a technical challenge, and if I can just get the API to work, and then that's enough. Unfortunately, that's not always entirely the case. There are a lot of challenges out beyond just the technical, and those really become bigger issues as you try to make a business out of it. So I'm going to take you through some of the hard things that we work on. Some of this was alluded to in the last talk about different pricing and business models. The issue of competition is a real one, although perhaps not in the way that you might expect. And then also there are a lot of challenges around support. Again, that might not be the issues that you would initially suspect. Here's our pricing page. And as you can see, we have several different plans, starting with the free trial, going through to small, medium, large, based on different usage levels. We offer subscriptions and one-time purchases. Very standard for most SaaS products. Nothing really out of the ordinary here. And so you might think, okay, so far so good. What's so interesting about this? But it does then raise some challenges. And specifically, the biggest challenge is that software developers definitely want to try before they buy. You have to give people a way to try the service. No one is gonna try. But the issue is, so as you'll see, we offer a free trial, and people can use that and they can try. But there's a really weird phenomenon, and I'm hopeful that someone does some research on this. But so we tell people we have a free trial, and for some reason there's some kind of like thing to do with the eyes or whatever. People see the term free trial as free and not as trial. It's really quite odd. I don't understand this, but a lot of people read free trial as free and will go to extreme lengths to abuse your free trial to not become customers. Okay, and this is a real challenge that you have to then expend a lot of time on. And it's frustrating because you actually want to improve your core product, and instead all of a sudden you're dealing with people who have rigged up ways to sign up 100 times for 100 free trials and things like that. And you have to spend your time, building stuff like this, where you detect that they signed up multiple times and say, please stop abusing the service, and trying to move them into becoming a customer. And it's kind of annoying, actually. I don't know what it is, but very, very few people would, if they went into a shop, would think, oh, if they go to a restaurant and they get some free appetizers, then when they go, that means I can come every single day and just always eat my lunch for free. But with the free trial online, people do seem to think that. And at times you even ask yourself, what is these people's times worth? Because I have seen, we've had many people who will gladly spend days of their time to avoid becoming a $20 customer. I mean, it's really disheartening sometimes. Some of it might be cultural. I don't know, some cultures, I don't know if it's just that they want to avoid paying for paying in general, or what I suspect also is very often software developers are trying our service, and maybe they're in a culture where they don't have access to the company credit card or whatever to become a customer, and they really want to avoid asking their boss to let them buy something, but it's really shocking. And even sometimes at very well regarded companies, because you can see what company they're from their email address and things, the lengths that people will waste days to avoid giving you $25. So that's kind of disheartening. We also there's another big pricing contradiction that we grapple with, and we think we found a way to address it, but it did take us some time, and it's something that I don't know, I don't think it gets talked about enough. So on the one hand, software developers say, I only want to pay for what I use. That's obviously, I don't want to pay more. And intuitively, this kind of makes sense. Of course, you shouldn't pay more than you use, but I want complete predictability of what the pricing is going to be. Okay, and these two are an absolute contradiction, because very often the developer is completely terrible at estimating in advance what their usage will be. And so then if you have a model where you just say, well, you're going to pay for what you use, then of course, then they'll come say, oh, I didn't mean to do that. It was a mistake. I don't want to, and you end up in these like discussions with people who have overspent, and it's, it's kind of like investing your engineering time in trying to get the guy to upgrade to spend $20 with you. You eventually get to the point where it's like, is this really a good use of my time? Is this why I got into this? So it's frustrating. And again, I don't think we have this perfect solution, but you can check out our solution over on our pricing page if you want to see what you do. But it does leave you feeling kind of ambivalent, because you can't really please everyone. And I haven't seen anyone who has mastered this yet. So if people have comments on that, I would be interested in that. Next issue is competition. So in our case, some of you may have built location-based services or done things in the location space, and you'll no doubt be aware of Google Maps. So they offer a bunch of different APIs, and to a large degree, they are a competitor of ours. But actually, Google and the other big players in the space are not actually real competitors to us, because it's very easy for us to position ourselves against people like this, because they're the big guy, they do lots of things, and we say we're the small guy who cares, and we're the experts in the space, and we use open data. And so it's actually quite simple for us to differentiate against these people. A much bigger challenge, and one that I hadn't appreciated when we started this, is that our real competition is the customer himself, the developer sitting on the other side, who often thinks to themselves, oh, I could build this myself, right? And in many of our customers, we have to have, a big part of the argument is trying to convince them why they shouldn't build it themselves. And particularly this is the case because we're building on a lot of open source software. and open data. So in many regards, the tools that we're using are freely available to our customers as well. And this is can be a very big challenge to help convince these people that it does actually make more sense for them to work with us, and that yes, while they could set it up in a day or two, the thing that they often neglect to factor in is maintenance, of course. And maintenance is, I think as someone who's been building software for 20 years now, building things can be tricky, but maintaining them is much harder, particularly in a large organization where people are coming and going. And really that's what our customers are paying for. So, my advice would be, anyone out there would be, focus. It's key in your marketing materials that you focus on the technical challenge of what you're doing, but also on the maintenance side of things, because that's something that we found resonates with companies. Okay, support is another challenge, particularly we're a small team, so of course it's a challenge. But it's a challenge also in some strange ways that you also may not anticipate in the beginning. Of course, we all say, you can find endless API articles talking about how important it is to have good documentation, and there are companies like Stripe who are held up as paragons of doing good developer communication and documentation. But the reality is, no matter how good your documentation is, you're going to have a lot of people who refuse to read it for whatever reason. And there are just some people in some cultures who much prefer to have a phone call so that you can read them your documentation, or tell them things that are, they could find in about 20 seconds, in the H1 of your website. But so you end up spending a fair amount of time on things like that, which can also be useful because then you're in a dialogue with them and you can learn from them. But it's definitely something you need to budget time for. Another challenge that we face and that we've seen is a lot of, again, I think within kind of the API community and some of the newsletters I'm on and stuff talking about what's new with APIs, typically that community is very experienced developers who are kind of at the cutting edge and like, oh, check out this cool new thing and this new feature and this lets us do that. And the reality is many of our customers are very bad software developers. Okay, or if we're being, I'm not trying to criticize them, but many of them are just very, very inexperienced. We have many people trying to use our service who are students, maybe in their first semester of a computer science program, many people in, coding schools. And we get a lot of support questions that are very basic things, and so you can have an amazing Python, tutorial of how to use our Python SDK. And then you get questions like, how do I install Python? Very basic things like that you have to spend time supporting these people. So you definitely should not assume that all of your users are going to be excellent engineers or highly experienced engineers. That maybe some of them may be, but there are definitely, even some of our biggest customers, the members of their team are very inexperienced, and we have to do a decent amount of hand-holding. Then another point that I think is perhaps relevant is our customer base is global. And so if you go to our website and you check it out, we're actually a German company, but of course our website's in English and all of our documentation is English because that's the lingua franca of software development. But what it also means is that many of our users and our customers don't feel comfortable asking questions in English. They maybe feel comfortable reading English and looking at examples. But if I try to interact with them and ask them questions about their business, a mantra in the SaaS world is talk with your customers. And I have many customers who the last thing they want to do is talk with me. They don't feel comfortable talking, or they feel they're good enough at reading English and comprehending what's going on, but it's a big pain for them to try to talk or to write an email to me in English. So we always try to think about how can we make it as simple as possible and as clear as possible, and really eliminate jargon as much as possible, and use examples that don't require let's say Anglo-centric cultural knowledge and things like that. And happily that's worked quite well. There are a lot of customers out there that are outside of, let's say, Silicon Valley or the West Coast of the US. So it can be quite lucrative, but it's definitely something you need to factor in. Right, so just to summarize there on support, you need, of course, good documentation, but you cannot assume people will read it. Not every developer that you're going to be dealing with, has 10 years of experience and is proficient in their craft, unfortunately. And you will be faced with users and customers who struggle to communicate with you. So something to think about, that these are all things that were kind of somewhat unexpected to me as we started on our journey. So hopefully that helps you. Right, so that takes me through those points. So nearing kind of the conclusion here, I want to end kind of on a positive note, not just the problems, but what we've learned is that the main things that your site and service need to address from the customer perspective is really helping show them that it solves their problem, that people can depend on you, and of course the price needs to be reasonable. There is a temptation to say, oh, our product, and so in our case, is a geocoding API, but what we found is much more than that. The real product is trust. So the customer wants to know that they can trust your API, that you'll still be there in 6 months from now, that the pricing is going to be consistent and hopefully predictable. And I really emphasize to anyone who's trying to build an API-centric product that they think about this. How are you always conveying trust signals to your potential customers? Right, so this is just kind of the final summary. The real product of any API business is trust. Try to keep it simple, focus on the fact that it's stable and maintained, because that's something people typically struggle with. And yeah, one mantra that we have in the business is, if someone can say about your service that it just works, then they're likely a happy customer. So I would focus on that. Some very quick final points. Yeah, as mentioned in the intro, if you are into geo stuff, come along to GeoMob, which is a digital event I run, and we have a GeoMob podcast. We actually have an event 2 weeks from now if you want to join us. Anyone out there wants to write an SDK, we will pay you to write an SDK. And if you have any questions, then feel free to get in touch. That's it for me.
Awesome. Ed, yeah, I really didn't know what to expect from your presentation, but this was really like golden, useful, authentic advice. I really appreciate you being so honest with us today.
A lot of hard years of tears
Seriously,
behind those slides. So
open source is open source, but it doesn't mean it doesn't take effort. Like, frameworks change, data sets evolve, integration itself with all these different frameworks is a hurdle. And yeah, maybe some developers need to be a little more empathetic to, what's going on behind the scenes, it sounds like. Just thinking of these people trying to turn what you call appetizers into like full meals every day. I think that's a hilarious analogy. I also like what you're talking about, making a product inclusive for a worldwide audience, because as we witnessed just on this chat today, we have viewers coming in from all over the world. Like, this is the API as a product. The mantra here, it kind of defies country boundaries. It seems like this can be useful anywhere, especially with something like a geocoding service.
Well, I think if you do it well, you can benefit from customers all over the world, and so we're fortunate to have those customers everywhere. But definitely it's work, and you have to put in the time and effort to make it easy for them.
Yeah. Well, we have a lot of questions from viewers today. Everyone, thank you for submitting. First off, Scheherazade Davidson asks, what are some of the negatives or drawbacks of API as a product model? And I know, Ed, you covered that pretty extensively. Maybe Alan could chime in and yeah.
Yeah, I think I covered it a little bit toward the end as well. I mean, you have to be careful about turning off somebody from potentially trying it. So Ed's example of having a free trial is of course important. And anytime you price something, and I think Ed hit it on the nose when he said, the developer probably doesn't have the authority to spend the company's money. And I think that's really the issue that I see about pricing models almost all the time. And so, especially since we deal with larger companies, I mean, I was a developer in IBM when I started. I had no right to spend IBM's money. I mean, and the thought of trying to go and find the right person in IBM to approve this was a heck of a lot harder than signing up for another free trial or some other way of trying to get around it, right? So, I'm not saying that's the right thing to do, but it's a hard part of getting. It's the negative of having a price on your product. Now, if there's a way around that, and I've done some sessions recently about partnerships. So if you're dealing with another company as a partner, there's normally a business relationship discussion that happens about becoming a customer of yours or a partner of yours that is still a very human-centric manual thing. And then we have these APIs that you could very easily consume, right? Once you decide that you're going to become a partner. And it's that next step of getting past that human part of the business relationship that we have to solve. That's the next big hurdle in moving forward so that we can create these ecosystems and things like that. And until somebody solves that one, we're going to have these issues of people signing up and how do we get past that?
Yeah. I wonder how, API providers can sort of streamline that buying experience, because you would think it would be larger selling to larger companies because you avoid all of these kind of inexperienced developer startup kind of complaints that Ed was talking about. But it turns out maybe that might just be as difficult because you have to track.
I think it's more difficult. I mean, in the developer portal, you can put a price on something, right? And if it's the developer that's going to consume the API and they see the price and have the ability to sign up for it, it's all in one place and simple. But if it's not the developer who's going to buy it, it's some other role in the company that's saying we want to create a relationship with you. Now, how do I address that audience versus the developer audience that is really the target of the developer portal, right? So that's the challenge, and sending the business person to the developer portal to take a look at these APIs, that's good luck with that, right? So, I think that's the challenge.
Yeah. It also seems like there's a challenge around defining exactly what you're going to specialize in. I mean, I think OpenCage is a great example of a domain-driven design. They know what they're selling. It's highly specialized. So one of our questions was around how to design the boundary of an API product. Also, what does it offer? Can we base them on domain-driven design principles? So yeah, perhaps Ed, maybe you could offer some feedback to that one.
Yeah, it's a big struggle because we often get inbound requests from people who are like, oh, I see you do geocoding. Do you also do this? And it'll be some kind of tangentially related. I mean, very obvious one is people will be like, oh, do you also do maps? And so we don't do maps because it's a big complicated thing. But then on the other hand, at some point, then you think to yourself, oh, I'm getting a lot of people asking me about maps. Maybe I should also offer maps. And then before you know it, you've got 10 different products and it's very hard to manage. It does take a lot of discipline to stay narrow. And then obviously you think to yourself, well, I want to make more money. Maybe I need to have another product. And, should I do that all under one brand or should I set that up as a different brand so there's no confusion? And there's no simple answer, really. It's hard. It's hard.
But it seems like that's part of the purpose for this whole API as a product movement is you want to keep a narrow focus. You want to reinvent or avoid, having to reinvent a wheel, not like try to accommodate like thousands of types of tires, right?
Yeah, I mean, on the other hand, then it's frustrating if you see, the problem with being very narrow is, I mean, the good thing about what we do is if you need geocoding, you need it, right? I don't really need to, I have to convince you I'm the right one, but right. You need it. But the downside of it also means if you don't need it, it doesn't matter how much you like me or if you think my website is pretty or whatever, or I use some cool new technology, you just don't need it.
Yeah.
So it makes marketing kind of really difficult. I have to find you at the moment that you're ready to use this thing, which is a challenge, which means then you think to yourself, well, maybe I should be offering a whole suite of products. And that way the likelihood is high that the guy eventually he'll need one of my things. And then once he has one, then I can upgrade him to the next one. And so, you know, I go back and forth on it. I mean, some days I even think geocoding is too broad and we should only do one subset of geocoding. And then the next day I think, you know, we need more products, you know, so there's no simple answer, unfortunately.
Alan, any input on?
I mean, certainly the breadth that you want to get to is of course part of your company decision. Typically, when I'm asked the question about scope of a product, it comes down to what consumer audience are you trying to address, and do you want to address that need? And so in Ed's case, you know, they've chosen the geocoding as the audience that they're trying to address, not the mapping audience, and that's fine. That's a perfectly valid, you know, decision to make. They could also say we're going to have a second product for mapping, and that will be an additional cost product or not, or however they want to do it. You know, maybe a bundled thing if you buy both, and you know all the complications of different pricing algorithms on that. But you know, to me, it's always about what consumer audience do you want, what do they want, and do you want to provide it, right? So I always work back from that. It's never about what I'm doing myself. It's always about what is the audience that I'm trying to solve want from me. And more and more of my discussions now are coming to companies that can't solve everything that the consumer wants, that they become part of a solution. And we start to look at not just an individual API, but maybe an API marketplace or something like that, where we have multiple products together from various providers that provide what that audience wants. And then that generates more drive to that, you know, marketplace, right? So so everybody benefits, and there's a lot of models around that as well.
Maybe we could dive into more specific kind of monetization aspects, because both of you touched on that, but kind of surfaced a lot of other problems and challenges. One viewer asks, for a B2B or B2C API product, is it common to price to the client on a per monthly active end user basis, as opposed to a literal usage level basis? So maybe what are the pros and cons of both approaches?
I haven't seen active user as much in the API area, although there's no reason you couldn't do that. It typically is what Ed was talking about, either some kind of a tiered usage model on number of API calls, and you price on that if you're going to price in a direct model. The model I talk about more is about value to that consumer. So as opposed to the number of times you call me, which makes a lot of sense for Ed's scenario with the geocoding, because each call is roughly the same, you know, value that you're giving back. If I'm a bank and I have an API about, I'm just, you know, this would never be an API that somebody would have, but I have an API that gives you a loan, and you could ask me for a loan for $1, or you could ask me for a loan for $1 million. Then I don't want to make the same amount of money from that one API call. I want to make a heck of a lot more for the $1 million loan than the $1 loan, right? So it's not about the number of API calls, it's about the value of the transaction that I'm doing with you. And that's something that's often in the payload of the API, but not in the number of API calls. And so, again, I try to push people to think beyond just number of API calls, and number of API users could be another metric that you go with. I haven't seen it very much, but it could be.
Number of users is actually quite common for maps. So some people do map loads, but effectively it's number of users. But the big problem with that is it's very difficult for someone to know how many users they have, because, you know, what happens if, and then also, you know, what if Google Analytics says I have 1,000 users and you say it was 3,000 users, and, you know, that you have, what does it mean to be a user? And it gets complicated. It gets very complicated. And I've seen people hesitate at purchasing because of exactly that reason, because they don't feel confident in how much is this going to cost me, and I don't know, and, you know.
Yeah.
So it's a struggle.
I like how in Alan's presentation, you were talking about, like, it's not always just the developer paying for something. These models can be far more complex. if you look to the telecommunications industry and their APIs, they are really complex. And, they're charging like differing pricing models on a per device basis. If someone's calling from a desktop versus a mobile or an IoT device, there might be like completely different charges there. So I guess my question here is like, how granular should we consider these things? What is there a benefit to being that anal, for lack of a better word, or is it better to find like a pricing model that appeals to more use cases?
That's a tough question. I mean, that's why I document so many different models, right? Because there isn't just one answer to that question. Again, Ed's example was great with, I want to try pay for what I've used, and then I want to have predictable costs. And in some cases, people want you to cut them off when they hit that limit because they don't want to pay more, right? And in other cases, they don't want to be cut off because that's their customers that are getting, turned down requests, right? So what's the right answer to that?
We have exactly that dilemma. Some customers say, put in a hard limit and turn me off. And other customers say, under no circumstances ever turn me off. And so the problem is, you could, of course, make that an option. But with each additional option and widget and toggle you add to your pricing page, people can't understand it.
That's it. It gets complex, and complexity is the enemy here. I mean, that
exactly.
The more you make this hard for that developer to sign up and use your API, the less developers you're going to get. Right. That's
right.
Probably a very defined answer to the equation is more complexity equals less users. I mean, that's going to happen.
I think that's a brilliant mantra to always come back to. So we're kind of running out of time here, but maybe we can get in a couple more questions. We just had a question come in from Trevor Ho, and Trevor wonders how we can monetize the API service if there is no comparable service available on the market. So how do I know what price is reasonable, and while how I can forecast the costing? So, I mean, sounds like a good problem to have in a way if you're developing a unique API without competitors, but where do you start?
Yeah, well, I think that is a very good problem, because then you can define the market. I mean, that's one challenge that we face, is that there are competitors, and so you have to somehow stay reasonable compared to the competition. I would just talk with the customers and truly understand the use case and understand what is the value that they're getting from this, and who are they? What did they value? Predictability? Did they value, they want to use this API as much as possible because each one is an additional transaction for them. So really, I think you have to start with the customers and ask them. But in general, I would start high, because it's always easier to lower the price than it is to raise it. So
good point. Yeah. And maybe
I agree. I mean, it's all, that API product manager role is not the easiest role. I mean, you have to go out and understand the customers and the value you're going to provide to them, and that includes what's it worth to them. So it's a challenge, and you definitely start high and work your way down. But you'll probably do some market research and figure out what you can charge. But there's no single answer to that one either.
Great. So market research, and perhaps, there are APIs out there. You could just compare your model to someone who's not in the same vertical as you. I guess that would be my little add-on there. Yeah. I think our last question for the Q&A here, Gregory Tall is asking, any advice to reach more developers? What can we do to get more visibility to our API? And this is something I've written about in the past. Like, there's been so many API aggregators and marketplaces and discoverability ideas. So what's going on here? Is there anything more than just, making it SEO friendly when developers are searching for something? What can we do to increase the discoverability?
Ed, you want to take it, or do you want me to go?
Yeah, it's very hard. I mean, we've been working on this for a long time. I think to a degree, you just have to have patience. You have to, in the case of our API is infrastructure that our customers depend on. So to a large degree, they really want to see that we've been around for a while and we will still be around for a while. They're not really that excited about, signing up for a service that's only been around for a short period of time, because they want to be able to depend on it for a long time. So you have to have patience. So find a way to get your API set up, I would say, and maybe have other revenue streams or something, and you can let it run for a while. Of course, using every opportunity to promote it, but I wouldn't assume it's going to be a get-rich-quick thing. I don't see that happening in the API space. Without knowing the category this guy is working in. But
oh, I want to refer back, Bill, to the thing that you ran. I don't forget, it was 5 or 6 months ago now, with that contest where we were looking at different API providers and their portals and how they enticed consumers to do more with them. And I thought there were some great examples in the few that we looked at. Where people, when you have a community around your API, FAQs, blogs, there was one of them I looked at that had some kind of a usage contest or something like that I thought was really intriguing. I mean, if you engage that person, they may start to use more. Now, I mean, maybe they just need the amount they need of you, but there's a possibility of getting them to potentially become more of a customer if you have more offerings, if you start to engage them and you answer their questions well and are there to help them. Obviously the whole point of the API is that it should be self-service, and we want that. But to the extent that there's a question, you need to be responsive to that and put things out there like articles and examples of how people use it and things like that. That really helps.
Totally. Yeah, kind of triumphing the community itself and the power that it holds. So I guess I could just end things with opening the floor if you guys have any final insights or advice to people trying to create an API as a product. And yeah.
Well, I just echo the advice I just gave: is you've got to be patient.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen fast. But it can definitely happen, and APIs are the future, and every day there are more software developers and more people using APIs, so dive in and get started, I would say. So
yeah, I mean, I put together the content on the who, what, where, when, why, and how, and that was kind of, I mean, make sure you've got every one of those covered, right? That especially the why. I mean, the why is always the most important question, but the who is also extremely important. The product manager role, big mistake that I see a lot of businesses make. Ed mentioned the beginning, that he thought it was a technical thing, and it turns out it's not just a technical thing, right? And yeah, people will realize that when they start down the product path.
More than a technical thing.
Yeah,
I love it. Let's end there. Thank you so much to these two panelists, and really great discussion here as well. Thank you to everyone who submitted questions. I'm sorry we weren't able to get to every single question. If you really have a burning idea and want to get in touch, please contact me at bill@nordicapis.com, and we'll try to figure that out. So I'm just gonna sign off with a few updates from Nordic APIs. Can you guys see my screen there?
Yep.
Yep.
So yeah, thanks so much to our speakers and everyone who tuned in. A few updates here. First off, we're going to be releasing an API as a product theme ebook, and this is going to collect our top blog posts on creating a working business model around an API. It'll have a lot around common monetization models, developer marketing tips, and other helpful business advice for API-centric software as a service. So if you like the topic today, I highly recommend checking that out at nordicapis.com/ebook. Also, if you love APIs, or perhaps you're working on your own API product right now, our blog is open for stories. So you can visit nordicapis.com/createwithus to read our submission guidelines and pitch a topic. We also operate a newsletter featuring updates every other week from our writing team. We're covering a lot of areas in the API space, and you can sign up on the website to always have a little bit of API knowledge in your inbox. Our next livecast I'm pretty excited about. We put out a Twitter poll, and async API was the #1 most requested theme. So we're working on getting one of the maintainers of async API initiative, as well as an implementer, kind of similar to what we did today. And yeah, so we're very, very excited to get this one out there in the future. Stay tuned for that. And finally, as usual, thank you to our sponsor, Curity. You can learn about their OAuth server and identity-driven API security solutions at curity.io. So that's all for now. Thank you, and hope to see you at our next event. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.